When maintaining your daily wellness rituals is important to you, the change in routine during the summer can feel daunting. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual, even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and much more. So you'll be fueled and ready for wherever life or your summer adventures take you. No fillers, no nonsense, just the good stuff your body craves. Plus, it actually tastes delicious. But you can try it for yourself because the variety pack includes all 6 delicious fan favorites: chocolate, vanilla, chai, matcha, coconut acai, and strawberry. So instead of worrying about sticking to your daily ritual, simplify it with Kachava. Go to kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
The opposition leader heads home. A former MP calls for a public inquiry. And Alberta's premier fights against some members of her own party. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Going beyond the headlines.
Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
If you don't like some of the policies of the federal government, get a new government. That was one of the messages Pierre Poilievre brought to his hometown of Calgary as he made his own pitch for Alberta to remain part of Canada.
You don't need a federal government to put up a stop sign, approve a mine, build a road or a hospital that is only inside one province. You do need it to clear the way for a railway or a pipeline that crosses many provinces, or to buy fighter jets that can protect all 10 provinces and 3 territories. The problem lately has been that the federal government has been terrible at the things that are its job while sticking its nose in things that are not its job.
For many, it will have sounded like a familiar stump speech from Mr. Poilievre as he expressed solidarity with frustrated Albertans, but also suggested independence isn't the answer. A better government in Ottawa is the answer.
Listen carefully to the concerns of those who are saying they want to leave. And you will find that they do not have a problem with their fellow Canadians, or even with Canada itself. They have a problem with the federal government. We don't need a different country in Alberta. We need different government policies in Ottawa. Restoring affordable homes and food, unblocking resources, pipelines, respecting firearms owners, locking up criminals, relieving taxpayers, respecting provincial autonomy and personal freedom, unlocking free enterprise. We know these are the things that Albertans have been demanding. The best news of all, it's not a zero-sum game. All of these things would make the entire country better off.
While Poilievre was pitching Alberta on remaining in Canada, former NDP MP Charlie Angus was back in Ottawa. He told members of the press gallery he wants to see a public inquiry into foreign interference connected to the Alberta separatist movement.
What we have seen is obviously now a rising number of offshore bots, fake sites, fake accounts. The report that the Internet Research Agency of Russia, that's as serious as it gets. These were the main players in Brexit. These were the main players in all of the European attempts to upend elections. So we already are seeing the foreign interference bots. But the allegations that money was offered, whether it's been put forward or not, remains a very serious concern, because it is that raises a clear question of what extent is the United States willing to go to break up our country.
Angus said he wants to know more about claims from Alberta's separatist leaders that they met with top officials in Washington, and claims that leading separatists are seeking a $500 billion credit facility to make an independent Alberta a reality.
A group of Alberta separatists were apparently invited for the first of a series of meetings with U.S. officials in Washington. Alberta separatist Dennis Modry is quoted as saying, I met the senior U.S. administrative officials just a couple of steps from the president himself. When we walked into the conference room, the first comment was, quote, "We recognize and support Alberta becoming a sovereign nation." Who arranged this meeting? Are we to believe that this marginal group could call up the White House and simply walk through the door? Were these meetings organized by the American Embassy in Ottawa or by the White House directly? Mr. Modry states that the first meeting was in a boardroom just a couple of steps from the president. So who represented President Trump in these meetings? Modry claimed that the offer of $500 million was put on the table. Which American officials made this financial offer?
There are questions mounting as well about the political future of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith because of her decision to call this non-binding referendum for October. Separatist leaders now say they plan to try ousting the premier using the bylaws of the party she leads. Then they say they can hold, quote, a real referendum. When asked about that, Premier Smith suggested she's winning over the grassroots of the United Conservative Party.
Number was as high as 42%. So the fact that it's now down to 24% shows that the work that I'm doing and the work that the Prime Minister is doing is working to give people hope again in the country. And that's what we have to do. When you see people who are upset, who are hurt, who are angry, who have given up, you don't ridicule them. You say, what is the issue that is causing you to feel that way? And then you address it. And that's what I've been doing, is working through addressing it. And it appears to be working.
There have been 2 polls on the question of Alberta's place in Canada released in the last week and a half or so. A Leger poll shows the Remain in Canada vote at 68%, the Leave Canada side at 24%, and an Ipsos poll has the Remain vote at 72% and the Leave side at just 19%. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Well, he's been known to travel by plane, train, and automobile. And transportation will be a theme for us today as we welcome back Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University in Fox Harbor, Nova Scotia today. Very nice place. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I'm not partying here. I assure you, I'm doing a presentation on the profound changes necessary that Canada must undertake in the world of Trump and in this new economic world that we're in. So that's what I'm presenting on to a group of deputy ministers and industry analysts and people from government and industry.
Okay. Very interesting. Also very interesting is the federal government offering airlines low-interest loans to help those airlines secure supplies of jet fuel for the busy traveling season. Now, some airlines, Professor, welcome the news, but WestJet says it doesn't want the money and slammed the idea as costly and market-distorting subsidies. What do you think of WestJet's reaction, and why would it say that?
Well, I agree with him completely. We've known this for a very, very long time. Nobel Prizes have been awarded, literally, showing the analytics of why subsidies to one company or a group of companies and not others is squandering scarce resources. And secondly, it does distort the price mechanism. But most importantly, Rob, and this is why I object to this, it's just that I guess this Minister of Finance, Mr. Champagne, he just really likes subsidizing business. He built the battery plants. We shouldn't have done that. That's what the role of the private sector is. But where I'm going with this is, and I'm not. People say this is theory. It isn't theory. The market economy is Darwinian. Okay, not every company succeeds. That's why if you look at the bankruptcy statistics of Canada or the U.S. or any country, but these two countries, you'll see every year there are some companies that fail, and that's not theory. By the way, that is not theory. So the market disciplines by rewarding the companies that are good at creating something of value, measured by whether consumers are buying your product or the buyers are buying your product. And if you are not selling them what they want, developing and selling them what you want, you go to business. And so these market signals are what drive market efficiency. And because we have a long history of intervening in the market to try to stop the market from working, what do? We subsidize companies that are failing. What has this done, amongst other things? It has driven down the productivity. We have a very serious problem of productivity in this country, and the reason for that is that weak companies that have much weaker productivity do not leave the market. And for those who say, and I know there's politicians that say, oh my God, we can't have a company fail. Those resources will, somehow vanish. This is not true. Resources do not vanish. The factory building where your company was will get sold by the bankruptcy trustee to somebody else that will use it more efficiently. The employees will go off and work for a better company that is more productive, pays higher wages. The resources of a company that fails are not destroyed. They are redeployed elsewhere. Ain't theory, people. All you have to do is look at the data from StatsCan of the number of people who churn. It's called employee churn. Some people get fired. Some people quit, and they go to other companies. This is all part of the churn of the marketplace. What he's trying to do is basically undermine the marketplace, which makes it less competitive, less efficient. And then we sit there and wonder, how come the Americans are skating circles around us?
I understand that, but I'm just thinking about this. Here comes the government. It's offering airlines, say, loans. They can borrow up to $150 million at a rate that, say, would be better than they could get at another creditor. Like, why wouldn't an airline like WestJet want to jump at an offer like that?
Oh, I didn't say that they wouldn't out of self-interest. I'm talking about whether the government ought to be doing it. And let me give you I think, the killer argument. Okay, if we're going to do it for airlines, what about all the small businesses that are losing money? I lent money to small businesses, and there's an awful lot of small businesses that are hanging on by their fingernails, probably some people listening to this broadcast, okay? Well, why don't we give them help? Why just 3 or 4 or 5 airlines? What about the people in the clothing store industry? What about people in the, I can go on and on. There's many, many industries in this country. Why not subsidize them all? What's so special about just the airline industry? And especially in this instance, the airlines don't even need the money. WestJet said they don't need it. Air Canada was quoted in the same article as saying, look, we've been saving up for this. We saw it coming, and we've got lots of capital. We got lots of money saved up, so they don't even need it. So here he is stepping in when I never saw a demand from any of the industries saying, oh my God, we're about to fail and disappear. Come in and save us. So this is almost like the government is, taking a little old lady across the street, even though she doesn't want to go across the street.
Okay, so let me ask you this. WestJet in its statement said, we asked the government to abandon the cycle of corporate charity, focus on long-term stability by fixing the overdue foundational cost issues holding our industry back.
I agree completely.
Very, very, very quickly, what would be a foundational cost issue holding the airline industry back?
I will decode their written in code all they're saying. It means you got to privatize the airports. The airports exploit the municipally owned airports, exploit their monopoly position because they are under no discipline from markets or shareholders. And so what they do is they jam the prices up. And so there's an example. There's a whole bunch of things that they can do, the government of Canada, because Transport Canada owns the land underneath the airports, and they act as a landlord and pass on double-digit rent increases to the airports. They can privatize like Europe did, good progressive Europe. They privatized most of their airports, unlike that capitalist country called the U.S., where the government still owns them. So there's things they can do to make the industry, to help the industry become much more productive and efficient and dynamic, instead of making the industry less efficient and less dynamic.
Okay. That's planes. We'll talk about trains when we come back. And Alto. And there's going to be a protest, farmers' protest on Parliament Hill against the Alto high-speed rail project tomorrow. Just some thoughts on that when we return. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
Back with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Farm organizations from Quebec, Ontario, across Canada want the federal government to revisit the idea of the Alto high-speed rail line between Quebec City and Toronto. They say the project could cost, in fact, will cost far more than projected. It will cause significant damage to agricultural land, and they're going to be protesting. Farmers will be protesting on Parliament Hill tomorrow. I'll be curious to see the visuals. What do you think about the merits of this Alto high-speed rail project, Professor?
I have certainly looked at it, I assure you. I've been dealing with transportation in my strategy capstone class for literally 35 years. You know, we're studying airline industry, the trucking industry, railroads, merchant shipping, shipping goods by boat. And for years, I mean, and it's just one of the most well-studied industries because transportation goes all the way back to the dawn of the market economy and probably before that. And we have just awesome stats, I assure you, in both Canada and the States for each of these industries. Transport Canada has incredible stats on railroads, passenger and freight versus trucks versus cars versus air and so forth. Okay, that's the first point. I think that this is one of the worst boondoggles in my lifetime that I've seen proposed simply because of the sheer cost, the magnitude. They have said they're going to build this railroad for between $60 and $90 billion. I think they're deceiving us, deliberately misleading us. I'll explain why. And this is my first argument. I've got two more after this, so just bear with me. I'll go quick. The first one is California has been discussing for literally 35 years building a high-speed rail, just like the one we're talking about here in Canada now, in Ontario, from LA to San Francisco. So I went and looked up the distance. It's very easy to do with MapQuest or Google Maps. And it's almost identical to the number of miles or convert it to kilometers from Quebec City to Toronto or LA to San Francisco. It's about 500 miles, which is 800 kilometers. The California government released a study by the engineering consortium of engineers. These weren't spin doctors. These weren't salesmen from a crown corporation. And they said that the latest cost figures, this is 2026, for this 500 miles or 800 kilometer for high-speed rail is going to come in at $135 billion US. That's almost 200 billion Canadian dollars. Now, this rail company in Canada, this crown corporation, is saying they're going to be able to build over the same distance, the same technology over very similar terrain, because I drove up and down the Highway 101 many times on sabbatical when I was at Monterey Bay, which is 2/3 of the way up to San Francisco. And they say that they're going to build it for a third to a half of the cost of the Americans. That's just preposterous silliness. Yeah. We're less competitive than the U.S., not more. Number two.
We only have a minute left.
Okay, they keep talking about how Europe has shown that there's an explosion of demand for travel if you build these high-speed rail. So I went and looked up the stats through Eurostats, which is their stats Canada. And there's 260 million cars for 500 million people. That's 1 in 2 have a car. And cars account for 75% of all passenger miles traveled. Rail is 7%, not even double digit. So much for the nonsense that they claim that large numbers are going to switch to trains from cars. And thirdly, they won't even talk about the development of autonomous cars, self-driving cars. The industry has put $100 billion into R&D. And Elon Musk and Tesla just went into production a month ago with the first self-driving cars. Once they become driven down to the mass market with production efficiencies, that car is going to just be revolutionary because it means that older people that have lost their license will be able to continue using their car, and it will obsolete passenger rail. There's my 3 arguments.
All right. Boondoggle in the making, Professor Lee says.
Boondoggle in the making. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Enjoy Fox Harbor. We'll speak next week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Okay. Bye.
Yeah. Professor Ian Lee from Carleton University. Focus Alberta is coming up next on News Radio.
Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to Kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
You have questions.
Now you know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
It's our Tuesday Newsday panel. And that means it's time for Focus Alberta. And we have with us today Rebecca Shulz, a former UCP MLA and cabinet minister. Rebecca Shulz, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me this morning.
And Trevor Tombe, professor at the University of Calgary's Department of Economics. And Professor, welcome to you as well. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Great to be on.
I would like to begin with you, Rebecca Shulz, and just how prevalent is the separation issue right now in your day-to-day experience? How top of mind is it when you are out and about? Do you find it's talked about in the coffee shops and the hockey arenas? Are people talking about it at dinner tables? Are you hearing about it all the time? Or are Albertans, for the most part, just going on and living their lives?
I would say it's a bit of both. I mean, I think people are busy. They're living their lives. Certainly in my world, over the last month or so, the national media has increased their focus on it. So we do hear it, whether I'm at the soccer field or the hockey rink or just out walking the dog. I mean, you do hear that from people. It is a top of mind issue. I do think that there's a bit of apathy out there because the conversation is just so pervasive, though. And I think that that's a bit of a challenge because I think that there is a large portion of the population that we're not seeing reflected in polling. And maybe are just thinking, okay, this conversation has been going on for a long time. And I think some of that apathy comes from the fact that there's a feeling the federal government just isn't going to do anything to change, especially on these economic issues that are very top of mind. And so, what that means for the fall, I think it's a little bit too early to tell, but I do think that there's a decent amount of people, like I said, not showing up in polling, even though they're out there talking about it in their day-to-day lives, because it's essentially all we see, really, especially with the national media focus.
Yeah. Just to follow up on something you said, the apathy, what are the risks that could come with apathy, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a risk that, people maybe stay home. And I think in the fall, there's a lot more on the ballot than just the question of, what do you think about separation? And I think that's getting a little bit lost in this. I think, Albertans made it very clear, both myself and Trevor on the panel, the Alberta Next panel that traveled the province to hear from Albertans about their concerns with what's happening in Canada, specifically for Alberta. And so, I think we need to hear from Albertans how they feel about those issues, what they want the provincial government to move forward on, what they want to see from the federal government as well. And so I think that's a risk, but I do think it's a pretty prevalent conversation. But I think, a lot of people are still weighing out what does this actually mean, and I think it's maybe a little bit too early to tell.
What's your sense of it, Professor? Is it the talk of the town?
Well, it certainly is within my circles, which I should say is not a representative group of Albertans. The very policy-oriented analysts and economists and so on. I'd say that, more broadly, as Rebecca noted, these economic concerns of many Albertans and the economic challenges that the province has faced over the past roughly 10 years is a really big driver of this. And even if it's not articulated specifically, the sense of affordability challenges being incredibly difficult, of wage growth not keeping up with, inflation or where one expected them to be over the past 10 years. It's been a challenging economy nationally and especially in Alberta as well because of the challenges with major projects, pipelines, facilitating more oil and gas production are things referenced a lot, but just in general, the weakening business environment we've seen over the past decade across the country has been, I think, an underappreciated driver of some of the frustration that is being channeled by some into separation.
So, Professor, just to follow up on that then, do you think some of the frustration would subside if the economic or maybe cost of living might even be more accurate, if some of those cost of living pressures subsided?
I think so. Now, I'm not an expert on public opinion, so it's a little bit above my pay grade there. But many of the polling questions around whether one wants to leave Canada or not connect into how much value Alberta is getting from Confederation. So Environics does regular polling on this right across the country, interestingly. And the question is usually phrased along the lines of, does your province receive so little value from Confederation that it may as well go out on its own? And the sense of economic outcomes not being as strong as they should be, that affordability challenge, some of that. And so I think then policymakers, governments, federally, but also provincially, need to double down on measures to boost productivity, boost economic growth, boost infrastructure, improve the economic union right across the country. The list is long for how we might move the needle economically.
Well, we'll touch on that when we return. In fact, you've been writing about that, breaking down barriers, for example, for labor mobility. You recently wrote a piece for The Hub on that as a way to help combat separatism and deepen economic ties across the country. Let's return with that topic when we come back on Focus Alberta today with Rebecca Shulz, former UCP cabinet minister, Trevor Tombe, professor at the University of Calgary in the economics department there. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Focus Alberta, Rebecca Shulz, former UCP cabinet minister. The Alberta government, Trevor Tombe, professor at the University of Calgary's Department of Economics. Professor Tombe, you argue at thehub.ca that breaking down barriers related to labor mobility, for example, professional credentials, could lead to economic gains that would benefit Alberta and the rest of Canada. What do you think is preventing that from happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the strength of our economic union in Canada, our ability to trade and move and just do business right across the country, is harder than many might think. You know, we trade a lot more internationally than we do internally, and it's not because there's tariffs from one province to another. It's really just because regulations are different, rules and standards and certifications and so on. And for labor mobility, that's often because we have roughly 700 province-level occupational licensing bodies that require of individuals, certain procedures, examinations, and so on, in order to be able to practice or supply a service within a province. And that makes it hard to move from one part of the country to another. It also makes it hard to serve clients elsewhere in the country without going through and having multiple licenses. And, the gains are pretty large, and I guess we don't need to get into that, but it's gains from trade, gains from labor mobility. These barriers prevent productive firms from expanding or individuals from getting better opportunities elsewhere. And the barriers, there are many, but I think often you have these professional bodies that would resist any effort to harmonize across the country or override their ability to prevent someone from entering a market. So there is a little bit of protectionism there on the part of those bodies.
Right. You said there are 700 different licensing bodies at the provincial level.
That's right. And I mean, across the country, not Alberta specifically.
Yeah, across the country. That's incredible to me. Rebecca Shulz, Professor, go ahead. Continue. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say Canada's a very decentralized country, and so much happens at the province level, and each province is so different from one another, and this is just one part of that broader story.
Given your experience in government, Rebecca Shulz, I mean, what are the impediments to streamlining something like that with your provincial counterparts?
Yeah, I think in some cases, and Trevor is exactly right here, he's the expert on exactly what some of the solutions could be. This is good economic policy to remove barriers. But, I do think sometimes the challenges raised are health and safety concerns, for example. That being said, the Premier has been demonstrating ways to reduce these types of barriers within Alberta. In each and every ministry across government, I know she has asked all of the ministers to come up with these examples where we can remove these types of barriers to help increase trade across Canada. I also know it's something that she's raised with other provincial leaders. I think the challenge is it's not a top of mind topic that people are focused on right now. So it is a bit hard to make it real for people. And I think from a productivity perspective, one of the things that I've seen in my position within government, can you imagine the amount of time, energy, and money that has been spent on fighting against bad federal economic policy? And I'm not just talking about the elected officials. I am talking provincial government officials, federal government officials, industry, businesses, trade groups. The amount of time that we have spent to stop the federal government from enacting problematic policies is also a massive issue from a productivity perspective and from an economic perspective.
Yeah, Professor Tombe, but what you're pointing to is, I think about something like the Atlantic Physician Registry, for example. Back in 2023, the 4 Atlantic premiers came to an agreement. Okay, if you are a doctor and you are licensed to practice in Nova Scotia, you can practice in New Brunswick as well. And you could practice in Prince Edward Island, and you could practice in Newfoundland. And they have this agreement among 4 provinces. You're saying there would be the potential for economic gains if something like that applied to more and more professions, right?
Yeah, that's precisely right. Now the gains from these kind of measures that make it easier to move and do business across provinces are actually larger in the smaller provinces. So Atlantic Canada is one of these regions that gains especially from these type of measures. And so the example you talked about there is a great example. Here in the West, Alberta is also a part and a leader within the New West Partnership Agreement that is not so ambitious that it makes it seamless to do business across the 4 Western provinces, but it is a way to move the needle a little bit. Within that agreement, certain types of trades, for example, you don't need to recertify if you go from one jurisdiction to another. So there are examples where governments have adopted policies to help, although the challenge is still large and remains quite large still.
Okay. When we come back, the cost of separation. There have been, 2-3 reports lately about what it would cost Alberta if it wanted to become an independent Alberta. And the numbers are big, and they don't favor an independent Alberta. We'll talk about those when we come back. Is it breaking through, do you think, with people? When we return, this is News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
We're back on Focus Alberta this week with Trevor Tombe, professor at the University of Calgary's Department of Economics, Rebecca Shulz, former cabinet minister in the UCP government. So Professor Tombe has called the Alberta Prosperity Project's numbers a fiscal fantasy. The premier has said separation would cost Albertans about $400 billion to start, and then $25 to $50 billion every year thereafter. Lenny Kaplan, reading this in the Globe and Mail this week, nominal GDP down, disposable income down, employment down, personal income per person down, retail sales down, housing starts down, residential investment down, all down, and significantly in some cases. Is any of this, Rebecca Shulz, in your opinion, is it punching through? Is it registering with people? What do you think?
And the premier to come out and to raise what the costing would look like. I think there's a couple of challenges here, though, that there is a lot of confusion because there are so many different entities providing costing on that topic. And so I do think it was important for the premier to come out and provide that. I think the other thing is that it's hard to make billions of dollars be tangible for people. So for real everyday people, especially I think about the people who I would spend time with in South Calgary, the federal government has been so destructive for the Canadian economy over the last 10 years. A lot of that, of course, we know has seemingly been targeted at the main industries in Alberta. And that's something that the Prime Minister could address and hasn't. Whether we're in a technical recession or not, that's not part of today's show. But the Prime Minister did promise that we would have the strongest economy in the G7, that he would focus on national unity and make us an energy and economic superpower. The question that people are focusing on is, are our lives dramatically different now than they were a year and a half ago? I would say no. I would say not much has changed. I would see we see a government coming out, they've got a strategy, they put in a task force, they commit billions of government dollars rather than fixing the real challenging issues that still are causing investment and jobs to choose other places, especially the U.S., over Canada. And so that is the challenge, because when we're talking about these big numbers, people are still asking the question, am I better off today? No. If the federal government did mean what they said, we're going to remove these barriers, we're going to bring investment back here, they would have gotten rid of Bill C-69, the tanker ban, the EVs. They're now, essentially creating workarounds around bad policy like Bill C-69 with C-5, but they're not actually fixing the bad policies that are in place. And so I think really that's what people are focused on. Is my life better? Not today. I guess
what I'm asking is, are they heeding the warnings, though, Professor Tombe, of what could happen if this were to come to pass? What's your sense of it?
Well, my sense is that, like Rebecca just noted, that there is a broader frustration, and this is a way for many, at least, to express that frustration with how the Federation has functioned to date. And that means that many who might vote in the upcoming referendum to, I guess, continue the process of separation might be doing it as just a way to express frustration and not genuinely wanting Alberta to become a separate, independent country. And so that's important to keep in mind. And then among those who do want to create a separate country, I suspect that most don't think that this is an effective economic development strategy, but want to pursue that as a goal for other reasons, whether it is non-economic in general, like what we saw. I think Brexit is something that made the UK economy poor, no question. Lower investment, lower employment, lower productivity, higher trade costs. And this is now measurable and observable, full stop. But there are still many that say it was a cost worth paying. And I think some might take that perspective here in Alberta as well.
Okay, very interesting to hear from the two of you and get your perspective for us in the ROC, the rest of Canada. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Rebecca Shulz, former UCP Cabinet Minister, Trevor Tombe, professor at the University of Calgary's Department of Economics. Talkback, coming up next on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It is 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today's topic, it has been a big issue for a long time. It's housing affordability. Here's the question for today. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you live, and how can it be fixed? What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you live, and how can it be fixed? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. We're looking for a diagnosis of the problem, a solution to the problem, because the problem can't be fixed unless we diagnose the problem. So what's the problem, and how can it be fixed? Give us some ideas. I was looking through some housing numbers today. Let me throw some numbers at you. These are pretty recent numbers. You have WOWA, which does WOWA.ca, does a great job of collecting, publishing real estate figures, puts them on their website. WOWA.ca. The MLS benchmark price for homes sold across Canada in the most recent month, a little more than $666,000. $666,000. The national average home price rose to just shy of $700,000. $695,000. That's for houses. That's the national average. I mean, it's more expensive in some parts of the country, less expensive in others. The average home price is $839,000 across all of Ontario. The GTA kind of skews the numbers, of course. Still a little more than $1 million for a home in the GTA. $1 million. In Kitchener-Waterloo region, average price $744,000. But in Calgary, the average home price is around $651,000, $478,000 in Edmonton. In Halifax, where the increases in real estate values have been extraordinary, the average home price is sitting at around $657,000. I mean, think about these numbers. I mean, the way they roll off $1 million, $800,000, $700,000, $657,000. I mean, none of this screams affordability. On the rental side, there's definitely been a cooling off, but rents are still not what you would call a screaming deal just yet, and they haven't been for a long, long time. The average rent, according to rentals.ca in its latest report, $2,029 a month. $2,029 a month across Canada. That's the national number after 2 years of cooling off. And Halifax, my gosh, our listeners in Halifax, you are in the big leagues now when it comes to sky-high rents. The average rent in Halifax is more than $2,300 a month. I mean, that makes Halifax among the most expensive rental markets in all of Canada now. You're creeping ever closer to the sort of prices that one sees in the suburbs of Toronto and in the suburbs of Greater Vancouver. $2,317 a month for an apartment in Halifax. Goodness me. Rents in Vancouver have fallen for 30 months in a row, yet still more than $2,700 a month. In Toronto, rents have fallen for 28 straight months, yet the average rent is still more than $2,500. In Kitchener, for a purpose-built rental, the average $1,862. If only it was $862. $1,862 a month. And again, that's after prices on the rental market have fallen for the better part of the last 2.5 years. Want an apartment? $2,000 a month. $2,000 a month for millions and millions of Canadians. Within the last 24 hours, a report was released by the Federal Housing Advocate. We have one of those in Ottawa. Federal Housing Advocate's annual report on affordable housing says the pace of construction of what is known as deeply affordable housing, what some might call subsidized housing, social housing, nonprofit housing, the pace of construction in that sector is so slow it would take 1,000 years, the Housing Advocate says. 1,000 years. 1,000 years to address the country's core housing needs. 1,000 years. The Housing Advocate says there's a housing deficit in Canada of 4.4 million affordable homes. That's even more than the estimate from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, which still says the country needs to build 3.5 million more homes than are currently being built. And it has to do that by the year 2030. 2030 is only 3.5 years from now, everyone. In order to restore affordability. This is the state of the housing market. Even after a couple of years of cooling off, the average price for a home nationwide, $666,000. The average rent still more than $2,000 a month. Why is it this way? If you live in Halifax or in Kitchener or in Calgary, if you're listening anywhere else across Canada, what's the problem here and how do you fix the problem? If we're not building homes fast enough, why not? It's not like multiple governments haven't announced multiple plans to do something about that. So what's the holdup? Why aren't we building homes at breakneck speed in this country? How much of this lands at the municipal level and long delays in issuing permits, builders that have to navigate a maze of zoning bylaws and regulations, deal with endless NIMBYism? Where do you stand on rent control and rent caps? Should landlords only be allowed to raise the rent by a certain modest amount each year? That's a debate that Halifax is having right now. Rent control, rent caps. Our questions, again, think of them as conversation starters. We'll see where the conversation takes us. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you live, and how can it be fixed? 1-833-668-2577 is our call-in line. If you've never called before, just mention that. We'll make your call a priority. Let's talk about housing affordability today, one of the biggest issues in this country. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Housing affordability, our topic today, as we ask, what do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability in your city, and how can it be fixed? 1-833-668-2577. 3-4 lines available there. Wait won't be long at all. Share your opinions, please. Share your thoughts. Housing affordability is such an important topic in the country. Tobias is up first on Talkback today. He's in Calgary. Hello, Tobias.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very good, Tobias. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. It's a lovely sunny day here.
That's good. Good for you.
So my thoughts, my wife and I have been trying to buy a house in Calgary for about 7 years now. Okay. And through the economic downturns and things like that, life gets expensive.
Sure.
So you try and squirrel money away. You try and get your down payment together. And, even with the first-time home buyers benefits and things like that, you're still looking at minimum $20,000 to even think about trying to buy a condo. So I think the biggest hurdle that most people face in this situation is coming up with that money, especially through affordability, price of groceries, every corporation in the world trying to, meet their targets. I think that's probably the biggest difficulty that everybody faces. And if the government could work with anybody, I would say work with the banks and work with the mortgage companies and saying, hey, maybe we don't rake these people over the coals, and that's about the only way they're going to get in the door. So,
all right. So you would say the biggest barrier right now is saving for the down payment, right?
Well, exactly. Most people can afford the rent, payment. Right? Your rent's looking, anywhere from $1,600 to $2,500 for a house. Well, a $300,000 mortgage, you're right in that range anyways. So at that point, why take all of their savings and then have that put into your down payment, and then you literally have nothing in case something happens, right? So then you're in the line of credit, then you're into all the other stuff, and you're just feeding the system, right? And then in that regard, but you're also the customer's getting screwed. At the end of the day.
So what do you think? Let's think about this. And I encourage our other listeners to think about this, and maybe they could offer some opinions. What could be done there to help people like Tobias save for a down payment? Maybe something about the stress test, for example, the stress test that you have to qualify at a higher interest rate than what the posted rate actually is. Have you found that that's a barrier, for example?
Yep, I have. We do okay, as far as our income goes. We do have, we're working professionals and we're getting there. But it's holy crap. If it's this hard for me to do it, I can't imagine what somebody, with single income and stuff like that is trying to do here. It's unreal. And Calgary's not even the most expensive. I can't imagine what people in Toronto and Vancouver and stuff are like. It's almost like people need to join forces with, say, another family and cohabitate.
And there have been reports that's been, people have been doing that, right? Multiple people going in and buying houses together just to put a roof over their head. Tobias, I wish you all the best on your house hunting journey, my friend. Saving for a down payment. Maybe what could be done there to help people like Tobias, save for a down payment? Let's go to Tim in Halifax today on line 2. Hello, Tim.
Hey. How's it going, Rob?
Yeah, it goes, Tim, very well today. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability, and what could be done to fix it?
Government at all levels, starting with the mass immigration from the federal government right down to have the city of Halifax councilors and mayors want to increase the population of Halifax by 120,000 people. I think that was in the next, by 2030, I think is what they were saying. And in the meantime, they're not building the houses are not being built. So they're displacing more people. Like your last caller, I understand what he's saying about maybe he's in a good position to be able to afford these more expensive homes. But if there's nothing there to buy, it doesn't matter what you have for a down payment.
Right. So what could be done, though, like say in your city, you're in Halifax, booming city.
Yeah.
I mean, what could be done to speed up housing construction then, do you think?
I honestly, I hear there's a lot of red tape. Like you mentioned before, contractors and stuff like that face a lot of different barriers and stuff like that. It honestly seems like Halifax, I've lived here all my life, is like a very backward city. They're trying to reduce the flow of traffic to the downtown area to the point that they're spiting everybody. They're turned a bunch of right on reds into like no goes. You can't turn a right on red with no time of day. They're trying to push transit, and it just seems like they're trying to. I don't know what they're trying to be, but they're not helping the people that are here.
Okay, because as I say, I mean, Halifax has big city real estate prices now. I mean, in excess of $2,300 a month for an apartment now. If you're going to, $2,300 a month, like $2,300 a month, I would expect to live in a palace on Bedford Bay in Halifax for $2,300 a month.
Yeah.
Now it's the average rent. Okay.
Yeah, that's like I said, it's crazy here. Part of it's the students that they bring in from overseas. Part of it's, like I said, the mass immigration. Part of it's all culminating to the same thing. It's raising. There's no houses. Supply and demand. It's basic economics,
right.
And
okay, yeah.
Nobody in the level of government.
I know immigration is going to come up. I have some notes on what's been happening with immigration. That's largely in the rearview mirror now. The Carney government is making changes to immigration almost on a weekly basis in order to get that system under control. What about trying to build homes faster in a city like yours? Bring more supply into the market. 1-833-668-2577. We're just getting started here on Talkback. Love to hear your thoughts as we talk about housing affordability, getting some ideas on getting those prices for housing more affordable for everyone. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Across the bridge to Dartmouth we go in Nova Scotia. Dan is in Dartmouth. Hello, Dan. And housing affordability, Dan, what's the biggest barrier to housing affordability in where you are?
It is. You there?
Yep.
Thanks for having me. I'll tell you what it is. The two big taxes. You got property tax and you got deed transfer tax. We were lucky enough to just move recently. Okay. Deed transfer tax on your average sale, you said it was somewhat over $600,000. At $600,000, it's $9,000 just deed transfer tax. There's no way that paper pushing process costs $9,000. You got to get that down.
So you're calling it deed transfer tax? So in some other parts of the some parts of the country it's called land transfer tax. You're talking about the land transfer tax? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, same thing. 1.5% in HRM. The lowest it gets is 0.5%, but that's only a small rural area. So 1.5% of the purchase price. That's huge. So right off the jump, we just moved. That was $15,000. Wow. We're lucky enough. We just got 2 acres outside of Dartmouth. Our property taxes for the year, and we're on well and septic, are $11,000 a year. So take the first year example to own a home. We paid $15,000 deed transfer and $11,000 property tax 1 year.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. Don't tell me it's going to the parks, because I'll build my own damn park for $10,000 a year.
Right.
Like, the garbage people are great. I tip my garbage guys. They're great. But I'm on well and septic and you need $11,000 a year. Even if I don't have a mortgage, if I own my private property, whose property is it if I'm paying $11,000 a year? It's not mine. It's someone else's. Why would I be paying $11,000 a year if it was mine?
And you're outside of Dartmouth.
I'm in Montague. So, I'm a stone's throw to Dartmouth. I'm in Montague.
Okay.
But I mean, come on. Okay. That is insane. Right. Deed transfer tax, property tax, you're pricing people out. But here's one thing. You sell your house now, the boomers, they're paying pennies on the dollar for their property tax. But when they sell it to the newcomer, that person is now priced out because property tax is so high on the new sale price.
Right. Yeah.
So renters are debating, is it even worth it? Put myself.
Can you imagine in Toronto? I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This is the Toronto situation. I mean, in Toronto, you have to pay a municipal land transfer tax and a provincial land transfer tax. You pay what you call a deed transfer tax. Then you pay it twice in Toronto to two different levels of government.
You pay it forever.
Same amount.
Why do we have to pay it forever? If I own my home, I get it right now. You say, do you own a home? You miss a couple payments, you find out who really owns the home. But if I own my home, why am I still paying property tax for things that you don't see? It's like, anyways, those are the two big things.
Thank you. Yep. That sounded like a stress reliever for him. Property tax, land transfer taxes.
You want everyone to know.
Back.
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We're talking about housing affordability. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you are, and how can it be fixed? Back to our phones, back to Halifax. Stuart in Halifax. Stuart.
Hi, Rob. I just wanted, you had an earlier caller having a hard time getting a hold of the down payment. Back in the 80s, the Nova Scotia government had a program whereby first-time homeowners were allowed to get a loan to the provincial government for with no down payment, but they had, of course, been processed and have the income. Of course, they were vetted. And that worked well. I mean, that was back in the 80s. We stayed in our home. We own it now, but I don't think I could ever manage a $20,000 down payment now.
So walk us through how that worked. Well, if
you're at a certain income level, you had to have enough to have a mortgage, of course. But they would waive the 5% back then, I think it was. Down payment, and you would make the payments to housing, Nova Scotia Housing, and eventually, if you wanted, if the bank rates were lower, you could get a mortgage. You could always switch it over to the bank. But again, it was like I said, you were vetted, and but I don't believe they have that program anymore. But it was really helpful back then.
Well, Nova Scotia. This is fairly new, I believe, and I'm just reading it right from its website. Apply for a loan to help with a down payment on your first home. Down payment assistance program helps Nova Scotians who pre-qualify for an insured mortgage to buy their first home. You could apply to the down payment assistance program for a loan of 5% of the purchase price of a home to help with a down payment. You can apply anytime, it says.
Oh. I didn't realize.
I believe this is fairly new. The loan is interest-free, repayable over a 10-year period. You must use the loan for down payment, obviously. You can't use it for closing costs. It says credit rating 650 or more, be a first-time home buyer, Canadian citizen or permanent resident status, live in Nova Scotia full-time. Do not have the financial ability to pay 5% of the purchase price of the property without help from the payment program. Be able to pay the closing costs yourself, legal fees, taxes, and I believe it is registered as a second mortgage on your home.
Okay.
What do you think of a program like that?
Well, it's a lot more helpful than trying to put money away with the costs of rent and everything. The other thing, Rob, I want to let the your listening audience know that anytime your assessments are too high, you give them a call and ask them to do a review on it. I recently had to do that, and they're more than helpful to have a look at your situation and everything, because I know the assessments, and the reason the assessments are so high, somebody could move into your neighborhood and buy a house if they're from away and pay a ridiculous price for it. Well, everybody else's assessment goes up in that neighborhood because of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it also says here, and I wonder how realistic maybe some of these price points are. The property must also have a purchase price that isn't more than $570,000 in HRM, Halifax Regional Municipality, and the Municipality of East Hants. What could you get for $570,000 these days?
Well, you know what? Moving out, like the gentleman said earlier, a little further outside of town, that's just the way. I don't know how people can live in town anymore. It's
right.
just. Yeah,
okay.
I'm not young anymore, but I couldn't live in the city anymore the way housing is.
Very good. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for calling. To Cambridge, Ontario. Up next is Sean is in Cambridge. Hello, Sean.
Hi. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Good to hear from you.
The average rent in our town is around just over $2,000. We're only about 100 kilometers from Toronto, so we're not like in the big city. But we have lots of building around here. People are talking about affordable housing. We have an ideological problem, I think.
Okay.
There's lots of building, but they're building McMansions and high-priced condos. So they're not building affordable housing. And the government's trying to put it on the backs of private developers who are in business to make money. They want affordable housing. They're going to have to build it themselves. They have to bite the bullet and build it themselves, because developers shouldn't be forced to lose money by building cheap housing, quite frankly.
Okay. So you think the government needs to step up, whether that's the federal government or the I guess all levels of government, really, and build more.
Yeah, they need to step up.
Not for profit housing. Not for profit housing, right?
Yeah, because why should a developer lose money by being forced to build cheap housing? I mean, if you're investing money, you want to make as much as you can, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, you're not a charity, so you want affordable housing, you got to do it yourself. Simple as that.
Okay. I mean, this report, I was browsing through this report from the Federal Housing Advocate because it is an annual report, and it's for... I mean, she advocates on behalf of people who are low income, really struggling. I mean, if they're
we're looking at 30, 40-story condo towers. That's not going to be affordable housing. We have subdivisions where these, 3 and 4 bedroom houses, double car garages. Again, that's not affordable housing. We need, more townhouse units, cheaper stuff, starter homes.
Yeah.
And developers don't build that stuff. They want to make money. So the government needs to step in and build it themselves. But nobody wants to do it because nobody wants to accept responsibility.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, the Housing Advocate annual report out today. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, housing deficit of what are called deeply affordable housing units, non-for-profit housing units, 4.4 million. We need 4.4 million of those. In Canada, that's the state of things, according to the Housing Advocate. I'm Rob Snow. Housing affordability. 3-4 lines available. Open to hearing any ideas on diagnosing the problems with housing affordability and trying to come up with fixes. That's what we're doing today with your help here on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Housing affordability. What is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you are? How can that be addressed? How can it be fixed? 1-833-668-2577. There are 4 lines available there. And we'd love to hear your opinions, your experiences, your solutions to this ever-pressing problem in this country. Eric is in Halifax. Lots of calls from Halifax today. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Rob. Affordability is the word of the day. Most of the people in Halifax, majority of them are a lot of seniors, and they can't afford a house. Now, you mentioned there about $500,000. Well, you could go buy maybe one for a fixer-up and get your buddies that are, know anything about carpentry or anything like that, and go from there. But affordability is the word of the day. I mean, we just can't afford it. I mean, a lot of seniors, they're living from day to day, because I'm one of them. I can't afford to buy a house today. I mean, I'm a single person, so I don't need I'm happy where with my apartment. But 20-something years ago, my house was $115,000, and it sold for almost double that, to a bunch of immigrants. So that's the name of them. That's it, Robin, in a nutshell. Affordability. I mean, make them that they could afford it. I mean, they could go build a house, but make it for,
And again, I'm not just talking about the price of houses, okay? I'm talking about rents. And you have talked in the past about, well, what would happen if you had to move? What would happen if you had to move from where you are?
I'd probably go to Canadian Tire and buy a tent.
Like, that's the state of things for a lot of people right now.
Well, I mean, the owners are greedy. It's greed. They want their cake and ice cream too, and they're just not looking out for anybody. They're looking out for their own pocketbooks.
Okay, so right now in your city, there's a debate underway about the rent cap, right? Your rent is, the landlord is limited to how much he can raise your rent right now. And the Houston government hasn't committed to whether it's going to extend that beyond 2027. What do you think should happen there?
I think that he's two routes to go. He can go up to 7% or down to 3%. That's the way I would like to see it. You go any higher than 7%, you're talking a major crisis. I mean, my God Almighty, you people in Halifax think it's bad now, but if the rent, and I talk to a lot of people, if the rents go up, we're going to be living in, down in the dumps. I guess you could put it that way. It's not the way to word it, but
no, I understand. I understand exactly what you're saying. I was hoping that we could get into this topic as we make our way through Talkback today. All the best, Eric. Thank you for your call. Staying in Halifax again. We've touched a nerve there. Hamza in Halifax. First time caller, Hamza.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, I hear you just fine. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you are? What do you do about it?
I think the biggest barrier is what one of your earliest callers said, is that developers are building only for high-income personnel, for high-income citizens. And it's harder to get people in houses that way. I think the same way that, for example, the government has controls on environmental impacts of certain builds. So we can go crazy on pipelines, but there has to be a regulation on pipelines that has that minimizes environmental effects as much as possible. We can do the same for housing. Look, build all you want, but there has to be a certain percentage of your housing that has to be affordable housing. And that affordable housing, the allocation gets controlled by local or provincial governments, but the house and the building itself can get controlled, or the building itself is done by the developer corporations. I think that, not
so you're talking about inclusive housing. This is called inclusive housing.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Inclusive housing.
You had a debate in your city about that, and I believe your regional council voted against it, forcing developers to have inclusive housing, inclusive development.
That's news to me. It's upsetting news to me, but that's one way that I see it, because the other ways are even more intrusive into the development industry. And I'm not a fan of super ultra regulation, but there has to be some form of regulation such that, these corporations are benefiting from the government, benefiting from the country. They have to give back in times of crises for a certain period of time. This doesn't have to continue forever, but right now we are in an absolute crisis, absolutely in the city at least. And so there has to be some onus on the private sector to help the country get out of the crisis, just as they gain money from citizens of the country.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you, Hamza, in Halifax. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Barriers to housing affordability. And what can be done about it? Well, I'd love to hear from you today. I think we have cleared the phone lines, so the wait won't be too long. Fit you in no time at all if you give us a call right now. Love to hear from you. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
On the housing affordability to Calgary, Darren is there. Hi, Darren.
Good day.
Yeah, hi, Darren. What do you think is a big barrier to housing affordability where you are? What do we do about it?
Okay, they're huge barriers. First of all, I'm a landlord. One thing that has happened over the last 2 years is affordability has come down a bit. My ability to charge X rent has been dropped by a couple of $100. So what I did is I turned to my tenant that I knew wanted to stay there for 2 or 3 more years. Is I said, actually, I'm going to drop your rent. That doesn't happen very often, but I have a great tenant. I have a great tenant. I want to keep him there. So it was an easy choice. One of the things that is a barrier is, as a landlord, is my property tax. I appreciate the caller that said, hey, you can actually call your municipality and say, hey, your tax assessment sucks. It's too high. My house is not worth what they say it's worth. And maybe I can get a little bit of a tax break there, or at least something. Second thing is insurance on that house as a landlord is exorbitant. In Calgary, Alberta in general, it's crazy. Anyways, one of the things that I was going to offer, in regards to this is sometimes you have to actually recognize as a future buyer is that you might have to move in with somebody else. As my daughter got older and she recognized that she wasn't going to be able to afford a $500,000 starter home in Calgary, is she turned to her friend and said, hey, listen, let's get together and put the down payment down and we'll make it work for us. And as we get in a better position in the future, we'll get you into your house, and you and I together can get there. So right. I'm not saying that we aren't in an affordability crisis. We are. It's ridiculous. I bought my house at $100,000. It's now worth $450,000, says my municipality.
What kind of house is it? What kind of house is it?
It's a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath. 900.
So a modest house. Right, modest house.
900.
Right?
Yes, 900 square feet. And this is something that's happened over the last 15 years. Is there is no modest housing anymore. You don't have 1940s, 1950s. You know, there's no 1950s bungalow style where you have 900 square feet of living. This doesn't occur anymore. You have 2,000 square feet of home that you're supposedly you're forced to buy, and that's where some of the mistakes have come from.
Okay. I hope to explore that a little bit more in the second hour of Talkback. But property tax, insurance. Maybe an admission that there has to be sacrifices. You mentioned, cost sharing with someone else, for example. All very good points. Thank you so much for your call. Hour number 2 of Talkback right after the latest breaking news, and then more of your calls. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. I'm Rob Snow, and we have been talking today about barriers to housing affordability. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you live, and how can it be fixed? Again, let me run down these numbers again for you to kind of reset things, get you focused on the topic. We have a national average home price these days that is just shy of $700,000, $695,000. That's the national average. Okay. We're talking about, it's still the case, $1 million home in the GTA. That's the average. $839,000 all across Ontario. That's the average. $744,000 in Kitchener-Waterloo. $651,000 in Calgary. $657,000 in Halifax. Then you go to the rent side. The average rent across the country right now, and this is after 2 years of cooling off in the rental market, where rents have actually been coming down, but still $2,029 a month is the average rent in this country. $2,029 a month. Higher in Halifax at $2,317. Kitchener, $1,862. That's for a purpose-built rental. And in Calgary, I had the figure, but I can't find it right now. But it's around $2,000 a month in Calgary. Okay, thereabouts. What do we do about this? What's the problem? How do you fix the problem? On housing affordability. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Let's go to Halifax. First-time caller Sue is on the line. Hello, Sue.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, Sue. Thank you for calling.
Good.
What would you
say, Sue? Well, the rent cap is an issue for me.
Okay.
We owned a home all our working lives. We retired in 2018 after 35 years of healthcare work, and I'm in my 9th year of retirement. When we retired, we sold our home, moved to an apartment, and in the last 9 years, our rent has gone up $344. I just received my very first pension increase on January of this year, and I got $26 increase in 9 years in my pension. That's all I got.
Gosh.
And my husband got $43, and our rent's gone up $344. So I don't think the rent cap should be 5% to start with. I think it should be lower because, you know, people are really having hard times. The fact they even went from 2 to 5 was shocking to me because I know the area I live in is monopolized by quite a few, 3 or 4 builders who own multiple buildings. And I guess I don't know their side of it, but I can't imagine how the rent has to keep going up in order to help them build and build and build. Things cannot be as bad for them as they are for us. Am I wrong?
Well, there's some debate about that. How much did their property tax go up? You had a big property tax increase in Halifax. What about labor costs? What about the cost of materials, utilities in some cases? Right?
Yeah.
They have costs themselves. And this is one of the arguments against things like rent caps. It's always controversial. It discourages. You have a rent cap of 5%. It discourages building of new apartment buildings.
There seems to be lots of buildings. I don't know where the people are coming from to rent them, but there seems to be a lot of buildings going up in my area.
Well, they're coming from, first of all, they're coming from all over the world, right? You have immigration, but then you have people who are coming from, there are people who are moving from Alberta to Atlantic Canada now because they think Atlantic Canada is more affordable, although Halifax is quickly, I think, losing that reputation. You have people from Ontario who are leaving Ontario and moving to Atlantic Canada for more affordable housing. People who, and that goes both ways. That's young people who just can't live in the GTA because of the cost of housing there. It's much more affordable in parts of Atlantic Canada, certainly outside of Halifax these days. But you have people who bought homes decades ago in Ontario. They've gone up dramatically in value. They can sell their home in Ontario, buy a really nice home in Atlantic Canada, and still have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank.
Exactly.
Migration.
I'm sure. Yeah. And for us, we sold and we rent so that we could maybe do a bit of traveling. Well, no, that's not happening. So, and the people that we rent from were well known in our area for not raising their rents. I have a relative that lived in a building for over 20 years, and her rent only ever went up twice. But now the rent goes up every single year. And in my day, you used to have to prove or give a reason to raise your rent. You had to be doing something, correct, to increase the rent. But now they don't have to. They just keep putting it up. Anyway, it is what it is.
Your advice to the Tim Houston government, though, because this debate is happening right now, would be to keep rent control in place, or the rent cap, right?
Absolutely. Because
absolutely.
I know my husband and I have a pension, and we're lucky to have a pension. But I can't imagine how people that have children and are working, I don't know how they're doing it. I have no idea how people are affording to live at all. So I'm lucky that I have a pension, but there are a lot of people who don't, who will never be able to retire at this rate. Can't afford to eat, can't afford housing. Like, it's bad. But
okay, thank you.
Anyway, well, thank you for listening.
Thank you for calling. 1-833-668-2577. There you go. Rent control. Now, Alberta doesn't have rent control. Should it have rent control? Limits on the percentage that the property owner can raise the rent every year. We can talk about that or anything else that relates to housing affordability and is a possible solution to make housing more affordable for everyone. 1-833-668-2577. Be right back with more of your calls on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you live? How can it be fixed? Housing affordability. Our topic today on Talkback to Camrose. Brett is in Camrose. Hi, Brett.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hi, Brett. Thanks for calling. What would you say, Brett?
You know what? I sympathize with your last couple of callers about how things are going up and everything else. I'm not quite at that level yet, but I am trying to get the escape velocity to get to that level of retirement and everything else. And what I'm noticing now is my kids are coming home. So it's putting a drain on myself as well because of this rental problem that we're talking about today. So I've had to give it a lot of thought. And I think there should be something done as a collective in terms of a program that is a rent-to-own program. So it basically would open up the door so people would have more of a rent-to-own option so that they could have their own, I guess you could say, equity in the place that they're renting versus just kind of tossing it out, kind of having a hybrid approach of what's going on now.
Yeah, I wonder how something like that would work. I mean, if a developer wants to build an apartment building, what's called in the business a purpose-built rental. We are building this for the purpose of renting it out. How open would that property developer be to someone eventually becoming the owner of that unit?
You're right. You're absolutely right. We're getting into the nuances now of what's going to happen. Is you need basically the zoning rights. You need those to be looked at. That can be done on the government side. However, the amount of interest you can make, the amount of, I guess you could say, investment property and tokenomics. We are getting into a world of artificial intelligence and AI agentic that can handle a lot of this programming background. On top of that, we are getting into tokenomics to break the house down. We can actually help these people. So when my kids come home, they can't say, I've rented for 5 years, I've got nothing to show for it. You know what I mean? So they can actually have some sort of liquidity stake inside of these rental units that'll help them. There is a government component. There is obviously a private sector component, and it would have to be looked at. But I think the rent-to-own may be worth exploring.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, rent-to-own option. Thank you, Brett in Camrose, whose children are moving back home because of the high cost of rent. Anil, Waterloo.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
I hear you just fine, Anil. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say is the big problem with housing affordability, say in Waterloo?
Okay, so the big problem is the cost of all the incidentals to run a property. Like from a landlord's perspective, the cost of property insurance, the cost of heat and hydro, natural gas, everything keeps going up. So the landlord has no choice but to raise the rents at least at the inflation rate, because there's no other way people can, sustain the building and maintain that infrastructure for the tenants. And then, of course, the cost of maintenance is on top of that. So there is no way not to raise rent every year in this environment. So unless the government starts subsidizing the landlords for the heat and the hydro and reducing property taxes, there's no other option. And in Waterloo, all they're doing is building after building, ripping down houses and building apartment buildings that are, now we have a 55-story building coming up. Like they're just building up because there's no land left.
Yeah. So you're the total counter argument to Sue in Halifax, who says without a rent control, what's known there as the rent cap, it's going to be a struggle for a lot of people across Nova Scotia. The rent can only go up 5% a year. What you're saying, you're viewing it from the property developer, the property owner's point of view, is what about property taxes? What about the cost of insurance? What about the cost of utilities?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and so
because it was pretty hard to find an annual property tax increase from a major municipality that was limited to 5%.
That's right. And here's the thing. So when you have this situation, it isn't cost effective then for developers to develop in the the low income housing sector, because they're losing money, and they're not in the business to lose money. Nobody is. Even though we're sympathetic towards the people who can't afford to live in them, but the government has to put in hundreds of billions of dollars towards this to make it work. It's just no other way.
Thank you for your call. 1-833-668-2577. So we've taken calls from Calgary and Halifax and Dartmouth and Cambridge and Waterloo today. Love to hear from you. It remains one of the most pressing issues the country faces, housing affordability. For so many, whether it's a senior trying to stay where they are, a young family trying to save for the first home, or someone on the very bottom of the income spectrum who may be without a home at all and needs some affordable housing and desperately. 4.4 million people in that predicament. 4.4 million housing units short of deeply affordable housing. We can combat it in any combination of ways today. With your help on Talkback, this is News.
Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to Kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Housing affordability is our topic today on Talkback. What's the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you are, and what do you do about it? Mike in Kincardine. Mike is on the line. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Mike.
I don't think there is one simple solution to any of this here, but I volunteer at a food bank and I volunteer at several charitable organizations, and I have seen a couple things and trends here. One is I see that seniors are being forced out of their homes because they're on fixed incomes and the municipal taxes are going through the roof. And as you stated before, Rob, I haven't seen anybody holding to very many municipalities in Ontario holding to the level of inflation. And what happens is seniors who retired well early all of a sudden are relying on food banks, stuff like that, and coming to us for food donations because, one, they can't pay the electricity bill, one, they can't pay the gas bill, and any other utility bill they have. So that's one aspect to it. The second aspect to it is up here in Bruce County, and with Doug Ford here, is this whole new Conservation Authority Act. If you live within a creek or river or whatever,
right,
and you want to build anything for affordability, you have to now get shoreline, soil engineering studies, and everything else, and this can cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000 before you put a shovel in the ground.
Oh, I suspect.
I think the other big, I think that another big thing, Rob, is the income gap. When I first started out, graduated from university, I was making $23,500 a year. I could buy a semi in London, Ontario for $120,000 a year. The people just don't have the income to pay for these new houses, et cetera, and so forth. And I think we have another problem, too, with development charges. The infrastructure is old, and and they are using these development charges. And I know in one municipality up here, it's $50,000 for development charges for running a road or whatever, plowing a ditch open, whatever, before you even talk about building.
And that's probably per unit. That's probably per unit.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's correct. And that's what was charged in the subdivision. So
crazy.
I think it's an income gap, but I also think these municipalities and the Ontario government need to stop downloading this stuff onto first-time home buyers. We have, right here in Bruce County right now, we want to build some affordable housing. I know a friend of mine wants to build one. He can't build it because of septic systems, and it might raise the nitrate level too high in the soil. So, and the nitrate levels are coming down from the farm. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, Rob, from income disparity to all these ridiculous charges that you're getting. And if you're expecting a landlord to not raise the rent when he's facing 2 or 3 times the amount of property tax assessment, hydro rates going up 3-4% a year, there's no way in hell he can.
Insurance.
He can't
Insurance as well. Insurance. Yeah, that's a big one.
Well.
Yeah, but you really hit a hot topic there with development charges. This is an issue all across the country. How municipalities have been using this not only to help build new developments, but also as a general source of revenue because municipalities need the money. You know, a development charge on a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto right now is $52,000. Just the development charge. Built right into the cost of building one 1-bedroom apartment, $52,000.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Housing affordability, the topic of the day. What do you think is the biggest barrier to housing affordability where you are, and what can we do about it? We've heard lots of ideas today, and we've heard about lots of issues. One of them is rent control. There are always demands for rent control or rent caps. And whenever there are calls for the government to limit a landlord's ability to raise rent, there's always a debate about that. 1-833-668-2577. We can have that debate right here if you want. A lot of economists, if not most economists, view rent caps is counterproductive or a Band-Aid solution, something that actually makes the problem worse in the long run. Rent control, just as one example, I mean, it helps the person who is occupying the rental unit. Okay, they're shielded to a certain extent from big increases from year to year in their rent. So there's stability with that. But it comes with drawbacks as well. And one of the big drawbacks is that it can slow down construction of rental units. People who would otherwise want to build apartment buildings, property developers, are hesitant or just won't build apartment buildings. Not if the amount of rent that they can charge isn't reflective of their costs and the ongoing costs to actually manage the property. And we've mentioned a few of them here today. The increases in development charges, the increases in municipal property taxes, increase in the cost of labor, increase in the cost of materials, whether it's lumber or cement or carpeting or flooring or anything else, utilities in some cases. So they don't build rental units. They don't build what we call purpose-built rentals. And instead, they build investment properties. They build condo towers instead. Or they'll, if they're in the property development business, maybe they'll develop commercial real estate instead. Maybe they build a strip mall instead. And as a result, over time, over a number of years, if not decades, what happens, and this is poured out time and time and time again, the supply in any municipality of good quality rental units declines. And the supply that is available goes up in price. The quality of the rental units that are available deteriorate. And another thing that comes with rent control is a greatly reduced turnover in units. Once people manage to get into a rent-controlled unit, they're hesitant to leave because they would have to pay a lot more rent to live somewhere else. So the turnover of the units slows down to a crawl. So these are the consequences of rent control. And we've talked about this. They have rent control in Halifax, the rent cap 5% a year, but that is a policy that is set to expire next year. And the PC government in Nova Scotia still hasn't said one way or the other if that rent cap is going to stay in place or not beyond 2027. And it's already pitting tenants organizations against property developers. Tenants organizations will say, we need rent control. We need rent control. We have a housing crisis, a housing affordability issue. And if you let rent control lapse, you're going to have more people living in the streets. But property developers will say, because this is what they always say, be careful what you wish for, because property developers just won't build as many rental units as long as there's rent control. Politicians, in my experience, will usually side with tenants because there are a lot more votes to be had if you side with tenants than if you side with property developers. And it's usually spun in the media as you're siding with tenants who need a break versus greedy landlords. There are a lot more tenants than there are landlords, even if the politician knows that it's a bad policy. But the situation remains, and the fact is, even after a couple of years of softening in the rental market in many of the pricier cities, the average rent is still in excess of $2,000 a month. So this is one of the issues that we've been exploring today with your help. Should tenants be protected through measures like rent control? We spoke to a smart fellow, Rob Batherson, former president of the Conservative Party of Canada, who said last week, look, Rob, Nova Scotia has rent control and has some of the highest rents in Canada. Alberta doesn't have rent control, and rents are less expensive in Alberta than they are in Nova Scotia. And maybe he has a point. That won't stop some people in Alberta from saying, what we really need to protect renters is rent control. 1-833-668-2577. Lori is in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Lori.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Lori.
Hi. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, Lori. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question. I'm a first-time homeowner, but I've been told that if I improve my home, I can't charge for the improvements when I sell. What good is buying a first-time home if you can't charge for it?
Well, I don't understand why you wouldn't. What do you mean charge for improvements if you sell it?
Well, like
why wouldn't you be able to do that?
I was told I couldn't. Like one example I was given, like say you have vinyl countertops. If you change it to marble when you're selling, you can only charge for the vinyl which you originally had.
No, I don't see why that would be the case. People make improvements to their homes all the time.
Well, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
That's why
who
you buy a
told you this?
first-time home.
Of course, yeah. Who told you this?
The insurance agent.
Well, the insurance agent. Okay, well, who am I to argue with your insurance agent?
No, I just
and
wondered
your condo board? You're with a condo board?
Yes.
And they told you that as well?
Yes.
Well, maybe there's something to it then. Okay, I don't know. See, seems to be very specific to your specific condominium and the rules, maybe the bylaws about your condominium, ma'am. I wouldn't be familiar with them.
Do you have to
that
follow
sounds strange, though. Well, it kind of sounds strange to me. You would think, the condominium board would actually want people to make improvements to their units, but I don't know.
Right.
It sounds strange to me. I need to know more about it, though. I think, Lori, I thank you for your call. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Housing affordability. What are the barriers to housing affordability? What are the biggest challenges there? What's the problem? And what's the solution? I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
One of the big pushes when it comes to housing affordability from Prime Minister Carney is this new Crown Corporation Build Canada Homes. They've got this idea in their heads. You see it in their advertising on television. It harkens back to the Second World War, the need to find homes for people coming home from the war, for example. I've been reading about it. What was happening then? Can it happen now? Can it be repeated? Wartime housing limited. Maybe this has some promise with Build Canada Homes. If it is built on the example of Wartime Housing Limited, this was what we call now a Crown Corporation, Wartime Housing Limited, created in 1941, because a lot of people were moving from rural areas into the cities to work in factories. As part of the war effort, they needed a place to live. And after the war was over, many of those who served overseas, they needed to come home and have a place to live. And so it was the job of this Crown Corporation to build those homes. And maybe some of you lived in these homes. Wartime Housing Limited, very interesting, maybe even promising. It was basically a housing developer. It did everything that the modern housing developer would do now in the year 2026. It bought the land, it built the houses, and in its first year, it built 13,000 houses in 57 communities all across Canada. And this is basically how it would work. The municipality would provide building lots to Wartime Housing Limited for a nominal sum, and it would supply the municipal services like water and sewer, electricity. And in return, Wartime Housing Limited, WHL, would remit back to the municipality a fee per house, kind of like a property tax. Very modest houses in the beginning, because it was expected that these would be temporary homes. A lot of them were built without basements. And then a few years later, around 1944 or so, WHL started building homes for families and veterans coming home from the war. And what it did was it went out, hired architects, hired builders, and told them, come up with a series of pre-approved plans. Give us half a dozen models or so that we can build these homes fast and cheap. And once the houses were built, they were rented out. WHL became the landlord. And in 6 years using that model, they built 50,000 homes. And they were all about 800 square feet. Most of them had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. That's it. Nothing fancy. After the war was over, they got rid of this Crown Corporation, Wartime Housing Limited. They created the corporation we have now, Canada Mortgage and Housing. And all the assets of WHL were handed over to CMHC. And CMHC hired urban planners, designed whole community subdivisions filled with these modest houses. And it also got into the mortgage guaranteeing business for veterans. So a veteran could go to the bank with the backing of CMHC, get a 25-year mortgage, 1 interest rate for the entire term on a 25-year mortgage. Imagine that. None of this, 3-year renewal, 5-year renewal. And a payment that was about the same as rent at the time. And they could buy the house. And the average selling price of the house was between $5,000 and $6,000. Now, keep in mind, this was late 40s, early 50s. CMHC was created in 1947. Yeah, the average salary would have been about $3,000 a year back then. If you're making $4,000 a year, you would have been making good money. And those houses are all across Canada. They became known as strawberry houses or victory houses. I've often wondered, as I have watched the Prime Minister and listened to the Housing Minister talk about this, and CMHC has this catalog of homes. Why aren't we seeing more of these now? Why aren't we doing this at scale here in the year 2026? Like, why aren't we doing this on steroids? Because we need to build a lot more homes now than what was being built back then. And they built 13,000 homes in the first year, 50,000 over 6 years. We would need to up the pace dramatically. Again, I would remind you, CMHC says in order to restore affordability to the housing market, we need to build 3.5 million more homes than we're building now by the year 2030. Talking about 700,000 housing starts a year. The most housing starts we ever had in the history of Canada was back in 1976 at 273,000. The Carney government says it has a goal of 500,000. CMHC says we need 700,000. Is this a realistic plan? You listen to the government, it seems keen on it. But so far, it's nothing more than an advertisement on television. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We have a federal housing advocate releases a report every year, focuses on affordable housing. The fashionable term these days is deeply affordable housing. And the housing advocate in her latest report says at the pace of construction in Canada right now, it would take 1,000 years to provide affordable housing to every Canadian who needs it. That we need 4.4 million units. But at the pace of construction of deeply affordable housing, the way it is in Canada right now, it would take 1,000 years in order to provide everyone even a basic roof over their head in a deeply, deeply affordable housing unit. So calling for dramatic increase in government investments in things like public housing, what we call inclusive housing, not for various forms of not-for-profit housing, and cooperative housing. Deeply affordable housing. They don't like these terms anymore. Social housing, public housing. They prefer the new term, deeply affordable housing. And given the housing affordability crisis, the homelessness crisis, I mean, the logical conclusion would be that we need more deeply affordable housing. And I'm sure if you went to young people and said, we are going to build apartment buildings, and we are going to build row houses, and we are going to build town homes, and a municipal housing corporation is going to run it, and you can live in deeply affordable housing, I'm not sure if that's really what young people have in mind right now, because it hasn't proven to be a very good model in the past. Comes with a lot of issues. I'm more familiar with how things have been going in Ottawa. That was the big city I lived in for more than 30 years, but I imagine the issues are the same in most big cities across the country. One of the issues in Ottawa that I used to report on all the time when I was a news reporter there is the wait time to get into what would be a deeply affordable housing unit. I mean, 7 years was not unusual. In some cities, it's been reported it's more than 10 years, given the explosive population growth of the last 3 years. 7 years, 10 years. I used to remark from time to time, though, when I first moved to Ottawa in 1990, the wait time for social housing was 7 years, and there were 10,000 names on the wait list. And 10 years later, the wait time for social housing was 7 years, and there were 10,000 names on the wait list. And it was the same 15 years later, and 20 years later, and 25 years later. And another, it's not the big issue, but another issue is once people move into a deeply affordable housing unit, they're even less likely to leave than a rent control unit. There's almost no turnover in that kind of housing. And it doesn't become a temporary solution for a lot of people. Rather, it takes on a certain permanence. And it can even become generational. And another issue is maintenance. And there was a news report recently about this. I can speak to the situation in the capital city where the maintenance backlog, because it's run by a municipal corporation, hundreds of millions of dollars, $250 million, elevators that don't work, holes in walls, leaky roofs, drafty windows, busted boilers, all kinds of things. Because deeply affordable housing corporations, they either don't have the resources or the urgency to do a lot of these repairs. But at least the housing advocate is calling for solutions. And one of them is 4.4 million deeply affordable housing units. That's how bad it is in this country right now. Back tomorrow, brand new topic, more of your calls, and until then, the latest breaking news on News Radio.
Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to Kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.